past 15 years have seen many sacrifices. In Republican graves throughout Ireland lie the remains of Irish men and women who saw that resistance was the only method that Britain understood. A resistance which is not confined to members of the Republican movement alone. The nationalist people of the 6 counties have borne the brunt of British repression, murder, torture, harassment, intimidation, arrest, imprisonment, dawn raids and martial law.
There's one man who was described in a Fleet Street newspaper as the Chief of Staff of the IRA, Martin McGuinness. And the man is a craven coward because he's the same as the IRA murderers. He's a yellow-bellied coward at heart.
The city of Londonderry is where the present Northern Ireland troubles began 16 years ago. It is an increasingly polarized city, with public support having grown in recent years for the extremes of both sides. This film looks at those extremes through the eyes of 2 men, both young, working class, teetotal, church-going, elected representatives, members of the Northern Ireland Assembly. The first, Martin McGuinness, is thought by many to be the IRA's present Chief of Staff, responsible for bombing the heart out of the city in the 1970s. Yet today, he stands as a legitimate politician, able to attract 10,000 votes for his party, Sinn Féin.
I became involved in the Republican movement in late 1970, and I played, I believe, a full role in attempting to bring about what I believed was the only solution to the particular problem, and that was that the British must leave this country and that peace could only reign whenever they did so.
The second man, Gregory Campbell, is McGuinness's political and religious opposite, a hardline loyalist who needs constant armed police protection following a bomb attempt on his life last year. Campbell is a target because of his outspoken views, a strong advocate of a shoot-to-kill policy against the IRA.
There's no such thing as arresting people or detaining people who have rocket launchers, rifles, pistols, and other weapons of death. You either be killed by them or kill them. Now, I know the option I want. I want to see them dead. They've got to be killed, or else we're going to have another 16 years like we've had before. I think that the IRA could be defeated far more easily by the adoption of stringent security measures, such as shooting on sight active service units of the IRA. Obviously, that would deplete the numbers physically of the IRA, and not only would it do that, it would hit the morale of the young people who foolishly join such an organisation, because if they knew that to join the IRA would mean being sent out on a mission, and that in turn would mean the very serious probability of them ending up dead, then the morale would be severely hit. Right? Good.
I think that some people think that Gregory's very outspoken, and that maybe it does lead to bitterness maybe in the Catholic community. Before Christmas, a few miles away from us, 2 IRA men were shot dead, and my husband put out a statement agreeing 100% with him, with what the security force had done. And in a statement he said that Christmas had come early for him and for the Protestant people because 2 IRA men had been shot dead.
And I make no apology for saying that. It was simply Protestants saying that the IRA were getting a dose of their own medicine, and obviously they couldn't take it.
The result of Gregory's statement was that the INLA planted a bomb under a car one Sunday evening. We were leaving to go to church to take the children to Gregory's mother, and fortunately the bomb fell from the car. We had to do a roundabout turn to go to church, and we came as far as the house. We noticed that there was a police checkpoint, and when we were stopped, we found out that a bomb had been found in the exact spot where the car had been parked.
As a result of the murder attempt, there is a fairly big screen fitted to the back of the house, almost like a cage. There's been a camera and monitors fitted. All the external doors of the house have all been fitted with bulletproof glass. There have been extra bolts and locks put in front and back doors. I have police escorts with me whenever I go out almost anywhere.
I do worry about the children. I know that I have to live with the fact that maybe someday Gregory might be shot and killed. But as a Christian, I believe that God will keep us safe. It is something I'll have to live with. Other people have husbands, and I just say to them, just be glad that you have them, because you don't know. I don't know in my circumstance how long I'll have Gregory for. Okay.
To sing. Stand up, for Jesus, these soldiers of the cross, with eyes of fire, with mustaches of loss, from victory unto victory, victory on I can't see how those who are involved in terrorism, who go out and deliberately take a man's life, doesn't matter what the reason is, deliberately take away a man's life, just like snuffing out a candle, I cannot see from God's book how they can be Christians. I cannot see how anybody with a new nature could involve himself in deliberate acts of wickedness and murder and violence and terrorism. I can't see it, and I can't see that the Word of God in any way countenances it or allows it.
We don't defend the killing of innocent people at all. The IRA doesn't even defend innocent people being killed. The fact of the matter is that we are strongly convinced that the responsibility for every death in Ireland, whether it be the death of a British soldier, an IRA man, an RUC man, a UDR man, or innocent civilians, at the end of the day, responsibility for all that lies at the feet of the British government. They are the people responsible because they partitioned this country against the overwhelming wishes of the Irish people. They are the people who must pick up the tab for all that, not the people of Ireland.
The question of innocent death is always a matter of regret, as any death. Republicans don't glory in death, and very often that fact is misrepresented.
I believe that it's absolutely essential that Republicans express to the world in a very forcible fashion that there is a big demand in Ireland for the removal of the British presence.
identification, please? One man, please, phone over there, just for a few minutes. One man, please, open your boot and bonnet, please.
I worry about his safety all the time. Any mother would worry that has her son involved in a political struggle. I worry all the time about his safety and about all the family. Martin's a man. He can use his own judgment. I never tried to influence him any one way or the other. I know that we have suffered, but there are lots of people in Derry and in the 6 counties that have suffered a lot more than we did. They've had their husbands killed, their sons killed, they even have their little children killed. The 5th of October 68 was the beginning of everything.
The first thing which really deeply affected my political consciousness was the fact that my people, people from the city, were battened to the ground on Duke Street on October the 1st, 1968. For me, I think that was the turning point as far as I was concerned. It made a very, very deep impression on me, the fact that people who were seen to be the civic and political leaders of the city couldn't march on their own streets without being battened by the RUC. That made a very lasting impression upon me.
It was portrayed as a peaceful parade which the police had attacked, and that wasn't the case at all, because I know many people who were at the parade and who said that the civil rights marchers, first of all, shouldn't have been marching there because it was an inflammatory part of the city to march in, and it was a very provocative type of a march, and that type of a march there was bound to cause trouble. The police naturally wanted to stop it, and then that's where the violence came in. Well, I would have no doubt that in 1969 and 1970, and indeed right through to 72, 73, through Operation Motorman, through Bloody Sunday, there was one man in Londonderry who helped keep the pot boiling more than any other, and that man's Martin McGuinness. I have no doubt about that. I have evidence which shows that he was implicated. Of course, the police also know that, but they cannot get enough evidence to put him where he belongs, behind bars.
It is no secret to the people of these areas, the people of Derry, that I was actively involved against the British involvement in Ireland and the British forces of occupation. And I have no regrets whatsoever about that.
But were you not, as you're widely described, as weren't you the military commander in Derry at that time, of the IRA?
Well, the British said I was the military commander of the IRA. I never said it. And I believe that for me to actually talk about that particular issue at this time, that what I would actually do, if I was to elaborate on it, would be to give information to the RUC Special Branch and the British Military Intelligence who may be watching the programme. So I have no intention of supplying them with any information which would be helpful to them. I don't really care if the British feel that I'm actually evading the question. The fact of the matter is that we had a situation where the British Army were seen as an occupying force. The RUC were seen as a force which acted on behalf of one section of the community against the other. Many young men at that particular time, in areas like these, done what they thought was best in the circumstances. Some involved themselves in political opposition, others involved themselves in military opposition to the British forces. And a lot of them were my friends, and I couldn't have had better friends as far as I'm concerned. And I won't apologise to anyone for that.
Were you involved in military action yourself?
I was involved actively on behalf of my people against the British forces of occupation. That's as much as I'm prepared to say. Kick the ball now, Baker. Big kick. Right, come on.
Every time he goes out, you're wondering, like, will I get back sick for a while? It's only natural, really, you know. The first house we got, and he got word from somebody that if it was going to get blew up, and we had to move house. I don't like to see anybody getting shot.
I think he wants the ball. Give him a ball, they say. Give it him.
I didn't mind at all about him getting into politics. Like, he's a mind of his own, and he knows. And whatever he does, I just support him, you know. I think it's the only way we're going to get through them is through the ballot box, you know.
Do you think then that they ought to give up the army?
I don't think he should give up the Armalite either. I'm sure he...
Well, today is the annual Easter commemoration. It's a time when we specifically pay tribute to the volunteers of the Irish Republican Army who have lost their lives in every campaign since the partition of Ireland.
Martin McGuinness. He's the man who's responsible for so many deaths. Deaths not only of policemen, soldiers and UDR men, but deaths of many innocent Catholics as well. And that is why that there are a number of Roman Catholics who are very much opposed to the IRA because of what the IRA, Sinn Féin and Martin McGuinness have done to them.
We believe that the only way that Irish people can bring about the freedom of their country is through the use of armed struggle. I wish it could be done in another way. If someone could tell me a peaceful way to do it, then I would gladly support that, but no one has yet done that.
I am proud and honoured to be with you here today to commemorate and pay tribute to the volunteers of the Irish Republican Army from this historic county who gave their lives in every generation in our legitimate struggle for freedom and justice in Ireland. In doing so, we are in union with Republicans from every part of Ireland in honouring the memory of our friends, the freedom fighters of the IRA, who unselfishly gave their everything in our continuing struggle against foreign occupation and domination. And on this Easter Sunday, we particularly remember our fallen comrades of this generation. Our thoughts are with their families, many of whom are here, and a people that has endured such torment and hardship for 15 years can never forget the sacrifices made by our comrades in jails throughout Ireland, England and America. Their unconquerable spirit will always be an inspiration to us all.
In the Protestant community, there is a great concern that somebody like Martin McGuinness can become almost a cult figure in a Republican community, can be elected at election after election, can get thousands of votes from the Roman Catholic community with the record that he has and with the viewpoint that he has on life. His viewpoint's quite clear, that those who want the British connection either get out voluntarily or get out at the point of a gun. Now, with that viewpoint, and getting endorsed by a large section of the Roman Catholic community, Protestant people very rightly feel alarmed that that's the case, and feel disgusted that a man such as that should receive some type of endorsement from the Catholic population. I think Doc, the last I think it was a newspaper last week described McGuinness as the Chief of Staff of the IRA.
Yes.
And even though McGuinness issued a denial, there seems to be strong feeling that McGuinness is very deeply implicated here, especially, and with all the destruction that there's been in Londonderry. You know, that Fleet Street newspaper revelation that he was the Chief of Staff is very disturbing if it's true.
Yes.
You know.
Well, of course, I think that there's no difference between the leadership of Sinn Féin and the leadership of the IRA, and I think that the papers that the police have got have proved that. And I don't draw the distinction at all. I believe that the leadership of the IRA and the leadership of Sinn Féin are one and the same. And yes, and we have always maintained that. And whether they want to deny it or not, proof positive is that they don't come out and condemn the atrocities that the IRA carry out. And of course, they say they're the political wing, but I think that they're both part of one overall organisation. And I believe the leadership of Sinn Féin and the leadership of the IRA are identical. And I can't see Gerry Adams, McGuinness and Danny Morrison being outside the IRA Army Council. I wouldn't accept that.
I don't think so. About the end of the winter, and that is that it's coming round to the band season again. And then the Protestant feet start marching right through to August. And you know, there's one thing the Republicans don't like, and they don't like it in this city, and that's Protestants marching for their rights and for all that they hold dear.
I have absolutely no time for those pussyfooters in high places who would like to stop the Protestant bands from marching. We will march, and we will continue to march. I have got a message tonight for Sinn Féin. And I want to tell Sinn Féin and the Martin McGuinnesses and the Jerry Morrises and the Jerry Adams of this world, you'll never defeat the Protestant people of Ulster. Let me remind them that they have never faced the Protestant people of Ulster as yet. Oh yes, our security forces have been handcuffed by the treachery of Whitehall and by successive British governments, both of Labour and of Conservative colour. But a day will come when we, the Protestants of Ulster, will take on the IRA and bury them once and for all.
But I want to start this morning with a report from each of the areas on how our nominations went, any problems with the candidates and any problems with harassment.
Joe Watson has been arrested today and been last week.
Right, yeah.
Is Fran McCann released?
Fran McCann's released, yeah. It would all stem from the fact that I think that when you were stopped last week, all the names and addresses of the candidates, the election agents and director of elections and nominees, for example Kieran McGartley in Castledare, who just signed the nomination papers of a candidate there and who isn't involved in Sinn Féin, was arrested and taken to Strand Road as well. So there's a fairly widespread campaign of harassment from the RUC.
The British government has never listened to anything else other than the use of force. And at the end of the day, while an electoral policy or electoral strategy is an important part in the overall Republican struggle, if everyone in Ireland tomorrow morning voted for Sinn Féin, it wouldn't make a blind bit of difference to the British government.
They should be instructed to keep a file in their area.
I know, but they should ring, at least if they rang her every day, that she knew who has been elected.
Right.
If we had a harassment log and did what I want to say, and then regularly every week issue a sort of a summary of the amount of arrests. Well, I think the deaths of British soldiers, like the deaths of any human being, are very regrettable. I think all the more so because they are unnecessary deaths. British soldiers are being killed here because of the intention of their government to maintain this statelet. And British soldiers actually have become the life support unit by which this statelet is maintained. On a personal level, if they weren't here as an army of occupation, I could obviously identify with them. Most of the squaddies are working class people from areas not unlike West Belfast, from Liverpool or Glasgow or London or wherever. But there is a war, and the way to stop the killing is to resolve the problem. The killings are a symptom of the problem. If the problem's resolved, then no one needs to get killed.
I think if the British Army were to pull out of Northern Ireland and the British government were to announce that at some future date a United Ireland was going to come about, Protestants would then feel that all they had campaigned for, all they had voted for, all they had worked to try and prevent happening had all been thrown to the one side, and the British government had betrayed us totally and irrevocably. There would then be a substantial number of Protestants who would see no alternative. They would see no way forward in politics, and they would see no way forward other than taking up the gun, because they would see that the IRA had bombed 1 million Protestants into United Ireland, and they would then say there's only one way that we're going to resolve it, and that is fight fire with fire.
Would you suppose
Well, in that situation, every unionist politician would be placed in a dilemma. I have no doubt that in that type of a situation, I would be out on the streets with the people.
With arms?
Yes, with arms. Well, Mr. Chairman, I think one of the main issues that we're going to dwell on in Londonderry is the recent revelation that we've had in the English press about Martin McGuinness and his position with the IRA. And I think it's now become apparent that he's been named in a prominent Fleet Street press as the Chief of Staff, and I think we've got to hammer that. And we are engaged in a smash Sinn Féin pledge to the electorate, and I think the fact that McGuinness has now been named in such a capacity, it will add impetus to our election campaign, and I can only see us having a good, successful campaign with that as one of the prime issues of the day.
The reports in the Sunday Times that I am Chief of Staff of the IRA are untrue, but I regard them as a compliment. And I feel that in saying that what is actually happening in these reports is that we have a situation where British intelligence and the RUC are, through feeding stories to the press, are creating a climate whereby someone like me will possibly be targeted by loyalist gangs and possibly be assassinated. So the only possible motivation I can see from the reports is that British intelligence and the RUC are attempting to create a climate whereby I would be assassinated and then labelled as Chief of Staff of the IRA. But as I said earlier, the reports are quite untrue.
This is Ian Pacelli, the leader of the Ulster Democratic Unionist Party, calling the people of this area to come out and vote qualified for the three Democratic Unionist candidates, Gregory Campbell, Mrs. Buchanan, Mrs. Hamilton. 1, 2 and 3 for the DUPs. Take it 1, 2 and 3 for the Democratic Unionist candidates. Thank you. This is Ian Pacelli, the leader of the Ulster Democratic Unionist Party, and your own friend and member of Parliament for Europe. You know the issue. 1, 2 and 3.
Hello, how are you? This is Mr. Noble.
Hello.
Get number 1 vote. Number 1 for him and then number 2 for Davis.
Well, that's just what we're discussing there about these things.
Come up around here or anything. It was because of the party and who he was standing for. I voted for that.
Right, that's important. I'm going to go and see Mary. I need to see Mary.
See you later.
See you later.
What divides Catholics and Protestants, Unionists and Nationalists in Ireland is the British presence. Take the British presence and British guns out of Ireland, there will be peace in Ireland. There's no question or doubt about that.
Isn't that rather optimistic?
I don't think it's optimistic at all. Well, I think that I am right to be optimistic because I firmly believe that that is the case, that in a situation where the root cause of the problem, i.e. the British presence, British guns are removed from Ireland, the Catholics and Protestants, Nationalists and Unionists, call them what you will live together in peace. I don't think there's any problem with that whatsoever.
I have no doubt that in the event of a British government withdrawal, that there would be the most bloody civil war that Ireland has ever seen. And Ireland has seen some of the worst civil wars that Europe has ever seen. But I have no doubt in the future, if Britain should ever consider withdrawing, that the Protestant people would react in such a way that there would be untold violence and there would be untold loss of human life. What we've seen up until now would only be a picnic in comparison to what would happen then, and it would be the most horrendous bloodshed when Protestants and Roman Catholics alike would be slaughtered in their thousands simply because we would have reached a doomsday situation.
With your successes in today's elections, isn't this now not the time to give up the Armoured?
Well, we have always said that we believe that we can only achieve what we're attempting to establish in Ireland, a democratic socialist republic, through the use of political action and military force. That is the Republican position. We don't believe that winning elections and winning any amount of votes will bring freedom in Ireland. At the end of the day, it will be the cutting edge of the IRA which will bring freedom.
suffering in Northern Ireland is such that people in England can't comprehend the extremity of that suffering. In fact, that suffering could be clearly seen if you look at the figures in Northern Ireland. 2,500 people have been killed by terrorism in Northern Ireland. To put that into language that people in England can understand, that would be, in England, 75,000 people murdered, butchered in 15 years of trouble. If that were to happen in England, the suffering would be tremendous. If it was to happen in England, there would be 600,000 people injured in 16 years. The outcry, the suffering, the hardship and the grief would be just something that the country couldn't contain, and that's what's happening in Northern Ireland.
Unfortunately, we do live in a world where the use of the gun is justified. It's justified by governments all over the world. It's justified by Reagan in Nicaragua. It's justified by Margaret Thatcher in the Falklands. It's justified by political parties and political leaders all over the world. And I believe that there are certain circumstances in which the use of the gun is quite justified. And I believe that this cause in Ireland, the freedom of Ireland, to establish an independent Irish Republic, is a just cause.
Don't you think that one of the ways of ending this suffering is to sit down at the table with Martin McGuinness and start negotiating?
No, I think that all those who have lost their loved ones, all those who are grieving, would take that as the most grievous insult if anyone were to sit down with people like McGuinness and those who planned and executed the murder of their loved ones. The one thing that they don't want is, after all this, after all they have suffered and after all they've come through, the one thing they don't want is anyone sitting down to talk with those people. What they want is those people dealt with so that others won't have to go through the same grief and the same suffering as they've gone through.
What do you mean dealt with?
I have no doubt that all those who've suffered so terribly want to see effective action taken against the IRA. They want to see any measures introduced, and I would say that some of them are grieving so much that they don't really care about the measures. They wouldn't go into the detail, but all they will tell you is that something has to be done. There's got to be something which will finish the trouble once and for all, and the only way you do that with the IRA is to kill them.